Well, thank you so much, everybody. It's exciting to have everybody here with us virtually today. We very much appreciate everyone's flexibility in pivoting our meeting format. As I'm sure everyone is aware, with some of the caseloads and the status, the new high designation that we have here in Wake County, at least. There was kind of the need expressed by a few folks that we needed to think about having this as a virtual option. So we do appreciate your flexibility. Obviously, we'd love to see everyone in person today, but we will look forward to having that opportunity at some of our upcoming future meetings. So as we're getting started here, we're going to go through a few introductions and then provide a little bit of information on our project background, our public engagement plan and member involvement, some idea gathering, and then giving you a little bit of a peek about what's next in our process. So just to start this introductory process off, I do want to take the opportunity to introduce myself and other members from the project team from whom you'll likely be hearing a good bit during today's meeting. I'm Allison Flewitt. I'm with Kimley Horn and Associates, and I'm the overall project manager on the consultant side for the Southeast Area Study. I'm very excited to be a part of this. I've lived in the Triangle area for the past more than 18 years now, and I actually got the pleasure of being a part of the previous Southeast Area Study, and have also had the chance to work in many of the communities that are a part of this study. So this is a place that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited that we're having the chance to update this important study for our region. So I also want to let a couple of other members from our consultant team introduce themselves as well. So Samantha?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Samantha Borges, and as Allison mentioned, I'm also on the consultant side with Kimley Horn. I'm a transportation planner in our Kimley Horn office, and I've been working closely with Allison and Christina for the past few years on transportation plans throughout the county in the region, and so I'm excited to be here today. Christina, I'll pass it off to you.
Awesome, thanks guys. I'm Christina Whitfield. I'm also with our consultant team, specializing in all things transportation planning. And like Allison, I was fortunate enough to be a part of the last Southeast Area Study back in 2017, as well as a few of your all's jurisdiction plans in the last 5 or 6 years. So happy to be here today.
All right, and then you've already heard Brandon's voice, but Brandon, I'm going to let you chime in and introduce yourself here as well, please.
Thanks, Allison. Brandon Watson here. I am a transportation planner with the Capital Area NPO. So I'm the project manager from Campo's side, managing the study. I worked with some of you during the Northeast Area Study that we wrapped up recently. So we're kind of moving to the Southeast here and doing the Southeast Area Study update. And I was not a part of the original Southeast Area Study from Campo's side, but I was at Go Raleigh at the time and participated through there. But I'm very excited to get started on this study as well. And if you have any questions or aren't able to attend any of the meetings, please feel free to reach out to me anytime.
All right, thanks so much, Brandon. Sam, do you want to tee up what's showing on the screen here for us?
Yeah, of course. So we do need for this to be an interactive experience. You know, ideally we would be in person, seeing each other's faces. But in lieu of that, we're pulling back out some of all the techniques that we've been used to seeing in the past few years. And one of those is interactive polling. So we will be using a website called menti.com. And the way that you can access this is either on your computer in a separate window or on your mobile device. If you all wouldn't mind going to www.menti, that's MENTI.com, and entering the code that you see on the screen, which is 7186 1127. Another option is just to scan the QR code that you see on screen. Again, I want to say that this is meant to be interactive, so we really do encourage people to raise your hand, to speak up. I appreciate everyone who does have their cameras turned on at the moment. Please feel free to use the chat if the Mentimeter interactive polling is something that you're not comfortable with or unable to get to. But this is just one of the things we're going to be using throughout this, along with some open discussion. So just wanted to introduce that before we get into it.
All right, great. And if you didn't get all of that on that slide, the same login information will actually pop up every time we have another question. So you'll be able to capture it there as well. And that goes for those of y'all that are just joining us on the line also. So we wanted to set the stage because we do have a big group here with us today. We have members of our core technical team, as well as our stakeholder oversight team for the Southeast Area Study as a part of this meeting today. So we wanted to bring everybody together and kick off the preparation of the Southeast Area Study update with both groups. And the intent of this is to help bring everybody back up to speed with what went on in that previous plan, but then more importantly, setting the stage for what this update is intended to do, your roles and responsibilities moving forward within this planning process, and then spending some time getting some feedback from you all about what we see as the opportunities and challenges and the things that you're proud of and would like to see more of within the Southeast area. So Sam is absolutely right. This is definitely intended to be an interactive format. So please chime in. If you have questions along the way, feel free to throw those into the chat. We'll do our very best to monitor this as we go along so that we can answer those questions dynamically. All right, so also wanted to note, Brandon introduced himself and noted that he's representing the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. I think everybody on this call is likely familiar with CAMPO and the great work that they do within the region. But we're also fortunate that we're supported by a partnership as a part of the Southeast Area Study. And those of you all that have maybe been a part of other area studies know that this one is a little bit unique because we're actually looking beyond some of the MPO borders for CAMPO and involving the Upper Coastal Plain Rural Planning Organization. So James Salmons and his folks at UCP-RPO are great partners for this effort as a part of kind of looking beyond and really being a little bit more cohesive and not letting those borders stand in the way of a cohesive planning effort. And this, of course, is also being done in partnership with NCDOT as well. So all of that, I think, is helpful, not only understanding that that sets the background of how all of this kind of comes to be, but also in understanding that these are many of the key stakeholders that our jurisdictions need to continue to be in close coordination with and ultimately implementing what comes out of the Southeast Area Study as well. So I think having that partnership up front really does set the stage for continued success. All right, let's move on into getting the other side of our introductions taken care of. So this is going to be everybody's first chance to jump into Menti and kind of flex your polling muscles here. So Sam, do you want to walk us through this?
Sorry, I lost my mute button again. This is why this should have been in person. Yeah, so here we're asking everyone just to type in 3 things, actually. Give us your name, please, the type of organization that you're representing, and also the jurisdiction that you're representing. Our CTT and SOT groups represent a huge swath and variety of people, so we just want to make sure that we're getting everyone accounted for and that you all can also get a taste and see who all is with us here today.
I'll go ahead and note, if for whatever reason you're not able to get Menti to cooperate with you, which it's typically very cooperative, but you never know, you can also enter this information in the chat and we'll capture it there. We've got some excellent rule followers happening here.
Hey, Sam, this is Bonnie Parker. If you'd be willing to scroll down, can you, on the Menti so we can see some of the folks? Thank you.
You all are too fast for me.
Hi, this is Ken Marshman. I'll probably be the only one that makes this request. Is it possible to just do this verbally?
That's
Your
perfect.
thing. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm Ken Marshman, mayor of the town of Garner, and looking forward to the process.
Thank you so much, Mr. Marshman. It's nice to have you with us. Brandon, I see you even wrote the mayor's name in the chat, so we've got you covered verbally and written as well.
Great, thank you very much.
Got you coming and going.
Good, thanks.
All right, it seems like our responses have slowed, and I know that there were a couple of folks that entered in multiple names into the boxes, which is just fine. All right, why don't we go ahead and move on? And again, if you didn't have a chance to get your name and information in, you can just enter that into the chat for us. So we're going to start with providing a little bit of background about the Southeast Area Study. And I think we'll kind of start this with just asking the simple question. What is the Southeast Area Study, or as we like to call it, the SEAS? Again, we have some amazing rule followers here. Everyone's picking an integrated land use and transportation strategy. I thought someone would pick one of the joke answers.
Yeah, it looks like no one's falling for it.
Oh, yay, someone picked one.
Sigh between the jokes. There were so many of them.
I have to say, we were all very entertained when we came up with the joke. Perhaps more than we should have been.
It was entertaining.
All right. Well, I'm happy to see there were votes on all the jokes now. So we'll go ahead and kind of give you the official answer, the non-joke answer. So for the Southeast Area Study update, what we're actually trying to do is think about the integration of land use and transportation. So this is obviously looking at our existing conditions. This is an update to the previous Southeast Area Study, so it's been 5 years, which also addressed existing conditions, but things have changed in some areas dramatically within that time. And then we're also looking at those future travel needs for the purpose of reevaluating and revising as needed the Unified Vision and Comprehensive Transportation Strategy that was put together in the previous Southeast Area Study. So this does ultimately help us develop a series of multimodal recommendations that are tied back to best practices from a land use and also just from an overall implementability standpoint. And it's thinking about it from a regional perspective, but also understanding this needs to ultimately be relevant and usable at the jurisdictional level. So just to get a little bit more into the background of this, you can see the guiding principles that we actually put together within the 2017 original version of the Southeast Area Study. And this just gives a little bit of a flavor of the breadth of topics that are being considered when we think about that integrated land use and transportation strategy. So truly, you see some of those typical transportation things that might catch your eye: traffic flow, travel safety, active transportation and freight movement. But you can also see the linkage to things that transportation and land use are very cohesively linked between, such as livability, network connectivity, economic vitality, and sustainable growth. So these guiding principles will be a great starting point for us as we look toward thinking about what the vision and guiding principles should be for this updated version of the Southeast Area Study. As we get a little bit further into this, we'll also be talking about the public engagement process, which will be a great time for us to help vet some of what we looked at within that previous Southeast Area Study development, and making sure that it's going to be updated and relevant as need be for where we are right now in our update. So one of the things that we've started to do is work with our partners at Campo in understanding some of what has been accomplished and what may be even underway within this area. And there's a lot of different things have happened or are in various levels of implementation. You can see a couple of good old tip projects up there in Clayton and in the Johnston County area, where we're actually moving forward into getting some of those design or even construction out there and implemented on the ground, which is always exciting to see those things progressing into an implementation status. But in addition to some of these, and this is of course just a small subset of some of the things that are going on right now, we know that there are also new local plans that acknowledge some of the growth and some of the activity that has been happening within the area. Some examples include like the new town plan that has been undertaken by the town of Smithfield. There have been various Unified Development Ordinance updates by many of the communities within the Southeast area. Things like the Garner Transit Plan, thinking about transit in maybe new or different ways within the Southeast area. Also the BRT study to Clayton, and understanding that there may be opportunities for a higher level of transit accommodation. Some things that were only really being discussed at a very high level when we did the original Southeast Area Study. And then of course, progress on some of the major regional efforts that are going to have a big impact on how we continue to grow in the future, such as NC 540. And obviously substantial progress within this specific area since the time of our last plans preparation. So again, this is a place where we've had a chance to start to dig in and learn a little bit more. And many of you may have already provided some information to Brandon or the folks at Campo as far as some of the plans or projects that you have either completed, underway, or even those that you are looking to do within the next year or so. But we thought it would be helpful to ask, just to get folks' minds going. And these don't even have to be jurisdiction-specific plans. If you know of agency partners, if you know of even nonprofit entities that may be looking at plans or projects that could be relevant to what we're doing, it'd be great for us to begin to catalog those and then be able to dig into those because that will directly influence some of the background information that ultimately populates what we are going to be doing as a part of the Southeast Area Study. So I see some folks already entering some things in. Again, the Menti website and code is up top. And I won't say everyone as they go along, but I appreciate the diversity I'm already seeing here, such as the Rapid Bus Extension, MIS, from Garner to Clayton, the Neuse River Trail feasibility study, the Raleigh Community Climate Action Plan, the Garner Forward Comprehensive Land Use Plan and Transportation Plan.
And for anyone who joined us after our first introduction bit, did just want to give a little call out that we are using menti.com to get some of your feedback, but also feel free to write anything in the chat and also speak up as you'd like or raise your hand.
I see the commuter rail technical study on here. It's a great note to say that these don't all have to be locally specific plans. There are going to be a lot of regional plans in nature that also have a big impact to what we're looking at as well. I also love the note on the Smithfield comment that the data has already been sent. If you are with a jurisdiction or group that is helming up one of these plans and you haven't yet provided information to Brandon or Daniel or any of the folks at Campo, we'd love to go ahead and get our hands on that information. So please feel free to reach out directly to them, and that will just help us make sure that we have everything fully incorporated. I also appreciate you see some of the things that are already being entered in here really fit with that broader perspective in our guiding principles, such as the TJCOG land use and affordable housing study, the Wake County Health Needs Assessment. There are a lot of things that are kind of a little bit broader, but are within the purview of what we're going to be looking at as part of the Southeast Area Study. And it's exciting to see all of the things that are either completed or underway. Everybody in this area has been very busy. I think some of the countywide efforts are going to be very helpful to us, such as Plan Wake and the countywide recreation master plan update. Those are all going to be very helpful to us. The Johnston County Comprehensive Trail and Greenway Plan. All right, this is fantastic. Let's go ahead and move on. And again, if there are any that you think of that you want to make sure that we're aware of, you can always shoot those to us in an email, or for the moment, if you think about it, you can always write it in the chat within this meeting too. But a couple of other details, specifically For those of y'all that were a part of the last Southeast area study, this may seem particularly notable to you, but we have slightly changed our study area between the last plan and this plan. So if you look at the two maps that are on the screen, the one on the left represents the study area from the original Southeast area study, while the one on the right represents our current study area for the update. So you can see that it has largely stayed the same on the, what I'll call northern and southern edges. That's kind of a strange way to think about this map. But we have had some changes in the Garner area. We've adjusted that a little bit with some partnership from our local jurisdictions. And then we've also expanded out past I-95. The last study basically used I-95 as the dividing line, and this one allows us to actually look at what's happening on the borders either way. So I think that that may allow us to get a little bit more perspective about the type of growth that is happening or being affected by I-95 on either side. Hey, Jeff, you're welcome. See your comment about bringing in 401 to Lake Wheeler. So, and yeah, we think that these boundaries will hopefully allow, there may have been a couple of holes that seem like they presented themselves between some of our jurisdictional, or I guess regional studies. And so we hopefully are taking care of that on that side. So also our local jurisdiction list. I think many of you will already be familiar with what all is included in our local jurisdiction list, but I think it's helpful to see this fully represented in a list. All of our jurisdictions are the same as in the previous Southeast area study, with the exception of Pine Level. That is a new municipality that has been added as a result of our study area expansion to the other side of I-95. And we do have a more complete representation of some of our other jurisdictions that are on the I-95 line that maybe didn't have the entirety of their jurisdiction fully represented during the last planning process. So now those communities should be entirely represented as a part of the update that is going to be undertaken. But I think it's really helpful to put this into perspective, both within this list and also in our previous map, when you're thinking about the fact that this transitions us all the way from the city of Raleigh out to and past the I-95 area. And there are quite a few character changes in that area, but yet also a lot of places where we're seeing growth that is largely tethered together from that Raleigh area into Garner, Clayton, Archer Lodge, on into Wilson's Mills, some of Smithfield, and on out to many of our other communities in Johnston County. So it's exciting to see, I think, the cohesion and the opportunity for all of these things to be linked together. All right, so I wanted to spend just a minute here talking about our schedule. And I think this also gives us the opportunity to think about the different phases of our planning process. And you'll hear a little bit more about your role within all of this here in just a moment, as well as the public engagement process and how that's kind of fully integrated. So next, we actually start with our kind of first phase here, which was before this meeting. We've been meeting with Campo, with our agency partners, to kind of make sure that we had our sea legs under us. Things such as understanding a project brand, which you can actually see in the lower left-hand corner of this slide. That is our project brand for what we are moving forward with for the Southeast Area Study update. Also just gathering that data, thinking about previous engagement efforts, and then understanding what the public engagement process is going to look like going forward for the update. Into May through the summer, we are going to be thinking about existing conditions, the state of our region. What does that look like right now? Also understanding our policies and plans. So the exercise that we did with you all is actually very important and very timely, because this is going to be the time where we really want to dig in to those plans that are available and understand some of the key recommendations that were obtained, what were the goals of those studies, and then making sure that those things can then be fully tethered in to what we are developing as part of the Southeast Area Study Update. This is also going to be the place where we begin some of our key needs identification, such as our deficiency analysis, and even identifying some locations for hotspot analysis. And this is kind of finding a few key locations where we may want to go beyond the level that we typically get to in a regional plan and have a greater level of detail in a couple places where we feel like it may be necessary to either answer some questions that are unresolved at this time, or to get one step closer to feasibility or design. And then finally, beginning our scenario planning process. That actually will start in the summertime and continue on into the fall and early winter. We have a chance to do a scenario planning process as a part of this. Those of you all that were part of the last Southeast Area Study may recall this, but this is a chance for us to think about land use, growth, how transportation ties into all of those different things, and then the ramifications of that. What's important to us? How do we want to test this going forward? And so we have a chance to actually look at that in a very holistic way. Also in the fall, going into the winter, that's when we'll begin our multimodal recommendations development process and be starting to think about land use policy items. We'll also have identified those hotspot locations by that time and be working on our analysis as well. So then as we get into the early part of 2023, we will have moved into project prioritization, understanding what the framework could be for prioritizing projects within the Southeast area, forming cost opinions for those recommended projects, and then understanding an implementation strategy and wrapping all of that within our documentation. And then you'll see that we're looking toward the summertime of 2023 for final presentations and adoption. So the only other thing that I'll note on this slide is that we have a public engagement process that has a 3-phase structure as well. And that is intentionally structured to address some of those key items that are being brought up and that maybe we need decision points or we need feedback to help reach those decision points within each one of those different areas. And Sam will talk to you more about those in just a little bit. So I have referenced the 2017 Southeast Area Study about 500 times already. And I'm very curious just to get a sense from this combined group, how many folks participated the last time around and for how many this is the first go around? All right, so far it looks like it's about a 2-to-1 of folks that were part of the last effort and those that this is the new, all new, both of which are great answers. I think that there's certainly some perspective that those of y'all that were in the 2017 process may be able to lend the groups as we go along, but also for those of you all that haven't been, we're going to be very focused on many of the changes that have been occurring within this area over the past 5 years. And then also thinking about some of the implications for this area on into the future. So all of that is going to be a place where everyone can participate and offer a lot of great feedback to us. And whether you were part of this or not, you all are representing groups, jurisdictions that have, I think, unique insight into some of the needs that affect the Southeast area study. And so that's all going to be incredibly important to us as we continue onward. We did get a question in the chat, and it looks like it may have been cut off at the end from Will, asking what extent the multimodal recommendations will recognize and incorporate the adopted elements of the Wake Transit Plan. So Will, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything onto that question.
No, that was it. I just needed to understand whether the multimodal recommendations will be developed independently of the transit plan or with some sensitivity to the adopted elements of the plan. Of course, most of the footprint of this study is outside of Wake County, but to the extent that it's inside and shakes hands with it, for instance, the commuter rail study, or what's called the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail Study, I'm interested to understand how that will work. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking. Yes, we are going to be very considerate of the all of the transit work that has been undertaken over the past several years, certainly beginning with and continuing on with the Wake Transit Plan and the updates that have been undertaken to that, as well as all the complementary studies. You mentioned the commuter rail study that is ongoing right now. So yes, I think our intent is to be reflective of those wherever possible, because we want to be sure most of those do have funding implications and have been studied in a much greater detail than it's likely that we're going to be able to attain.
Thank you very much.
All right. So just a couple more slides from me, and then you all will get to offer a bit more feedback as well. Just a little bit more of a sense of who's going to be involved as this goes on. So obviously, the folks within our meeting today represent the Stakeholder Oversight team and the core technical team. You all are effectively our key committees as a part of this effort. And so you've been explicitly invited and offered to be a part of this because we feel like your knowledge, the folks that you represent, maybe the jurisdictions that you're a part of or the agencies with which you interface are really key to our success as a part of this process. So we're thrilled to have you as a part of this, and we'll talk a little bit more about what the responsibilities are of each of those groups in a moment. But as well, we wanted to let y'all know that we're going to be working with and presenting to the CAMPO committees. So there are two standing committees, the Technical Coordinating Committee and the Executive Board. Obviously, they're a key part of what we're doing. Our local jurisdiction members, this is something that we want to make sure, as I said earlier, is implementable, that can be carried back to the local communities where this is being prepared. And so we want to be sure that our local jurisdictional partners are tied in closely. Also bringing in key community stakeholders, elected officials within our local jurisdictions are so key to the success and the implementation, as well as members of the public. So you'll see as we continue to share more information about our public engagement process, how we're going to be engaging and in what forms in the future. So now we get down to some of the nitty-gritty here. And we wanted to give y'all a little bit more perspective on what we're hoping to get and what we think you all can expect to get as a part of this process. And so we wanted to review what we're calling the job description for the Stakeholder Oversight team, and then also for the core technical team. So first off, we'll start with our Stakeholder Oversight team. And when we're talking about our expectations and our hopes for this group, it's that you all bring your knowledge of the diverse community interests that are just represented by the constituents that you represent, by the groups with which you interface, by the jurisdictions that you come from, and bring that knowledge to us. We want to be sure that we are capturing the breadth of community interests that are out there. And by doing that, provide us some guidance and direction on the substance of our plan. I think we're very interested to make sure that you feel like, are we on track? When we get to those key decision points, providing us that input. How does this feel to you? Do you feel like this is going to be well received by your jurisdiction, or is there something that we maybe need to look into, or that maybe isn't clearly communicated, and that we need to address in a little bit different way? All of those are things that we're eager to hear from you guys. Also, your participation at public events. I think it really helps to have direct participation from stakeholder oversight team members such as yourselves. And then not only your direct participation, but also dissemination of information through your networks. And that can take a lot of forms. Answering questions from your constituents, from your friends, your colleagues, about what this study is, what we're trying to do. Also, when it comes time to engage with the public, using those networks as a conduit to get out the information of how folks can participate, how they can offer their feedback to us. It's so critical, and by far the most effective means of actually getting participation is when we get folks like those that we have on this meeting today, actually soliciting that directly from others that they may know or be connected to. So we are anticipating formally meeting with the stakeholder oversight team up to 4 times at key steps throughout this process. This, of course, is the first one of those meetings. Okay, so now we're shifting gears a little bit to our core technical team. So members of our core technical team are representatives of planning entities and jurisdictions within our Southeast area. And so many of you, as just part of your day-to-day, you're in the weeds. You understand what we're doing in terms of developing the substance of the plan and the recommendations that are going to go into this plan, and how it's going to relate back ultimately to your local jurisdiction as well. So we're really hoping to get that local insight from you and understanding, are there any opportunities that we have that we can capitalize on? Are there any potential barriers that we need to be sure that we're addressing as we go through the planning process? Again, we see the core technical team as an aid to us in our engagement process and our communication of the plan's development. And then also as a liaison for your staff, for your elected officials, and for your SOT members. So you're going to be meeting more frequently, up to 7 times, and then informally throughout, because we, as you probably already found out through some initial coordination with Campo, we have data that we want to gather, questions that we're going to want to get answered specific to your local jurisdictions. And so you all will be up to the moment, kind of informed about the process, how things are going, and then this is going to enable you to then serve as that conduit for communication with staff and elected officials. All right, I've talked a lot. I'm going to pause a quick second. Are there any questions that folks want to jump in on? All right, I either said everything perfectly or confused everyone. So Sam, I'm going to turn things over to you so we can talk a little bit about public engagement.
All right. And I'm going to assume we're with the former, that you said everything perfectly. Let's just assume until we other way. All right, so we wanted to get into the next part of our presentation, which is to talk about our public engagement plan, or our PEP, and then talk a little bit more about that member involvement that we've touched on with the job description that Allison just gave you all. But I did want to say that we are working closely with Campo, with their public involvement officer, Bonnie, on our PEP. It's currently in draft form. And once we kind of work through the information that we've received from you all today, and work through the draft with our Campo partners, we will be sending that out to both the CTT and SOT for you all to review. But today we're just going to touch on some highlights of what's included in that PEP. So what we have in here are our three main engagement phases that Allison touched on earlier in the presentation when she went through our overall schedule. So these three phases we're calling number one, discover, involve, and consult. And these are all intentional titles that we've given the different phases based on what they're meant to house and incorporate. So our first phase, discover, is really meant to raise awareness about the Cs and also educate the public. At the same time, have them educate us in a form of listening and learning in engagement that really informs the development of goals, revisiting the goals that we had in the 2017 Cs, looking at visioning, and also some challenges that we see in our study area. And we're actually going to start that process with you all here today near the end of this presentation. So just keep in mind that we're already kicking off the discover phase of our engagement plan. Our second phase is involve, and that's going to take us through the end of this calendar year. And in this one is where we're going to be taking our initial study findings out to the public. This includes the general public, our stakeholders that we identify, as well as you all and in the CTT and the SOT and our elected officials. No one is left out of these various engagement phases. And in the second one is really when we're going to get into the meat of our recommendations. Our final and third phase is going to kick off in 2023, and we're calling this one consult. And this one is really going to shift gears and take our activities and efforts to a bit of a consultation process when we're presenting our final recommendations, having the public, our stakeholders, and you all review what we found, really make sure that we're getting correct what we heard in the previous two phases, especially in that second phase, making sure that we're addressing everything accurately as we move forward. And the ultimate conclusion for phase 3 is really to have agreement and build consensus around this final plan and adopting it in the end. So included in our public engagement plan are some engagement goals that we want to be deliberate about as we set those in the beginning here. So our goals are housed under three main titles that you see on screen, but within each of these, we have some sub-information that we'd like to talk through. So our first one is to educate and empower. This, like I mentioned, is really to raise awareness about the Cs and provide educational materials to people as we're going through and going out to the public. We also want to communicate very effectively to participants how our materials are being developed and also how input is incorporated, because our public involvement is meant to be very intentional, and we need to be sure that we're taking into consideration the feedback that we hear and that people are very aware of transparency in that process. We also want to provide people with that opportunity, like I've mentioned, to identify their issues and needs and express visions and goals with this educate and empower goal. Next up, we've got collaborate and participate. So this means that we really want to interact and gather input from everyone in the Southeast area. This includes people who work, who live, who drive through the area. And we really want a broad audience and participation in this plan. We also want to leverage our partners, the CTT and the SOT, to really communicate and disseminate that information about the Cs to your local networks. You've heard Allison talk about that in our job description earlier. And the last part of that one is we really want to encourage collaboration among our partners, CAMPO, NCDOT, the UCP, RPO, to ensure cohesion and recommendations and make sure that there's just a shared understanding of both responsibility and understanding in moving towards implementation further down the line. Our last goal is to be deliberate and transparent in our engagement. And this is to say that we will be intentionally engaging communities that are historically marginalized. And we also want to enact strategies that ensure that the feedback that we do receive during this engagement process is representative of the voices in the room. Finally, we do want to be very clear and transparent about the process that we're taking and how those ideas influence what we're doing. Along with our engagement goals, we do have some measures of success that we're going to be building. And those measures of success will be detailed in the public engagement plan. But really, we're structuring them around numbers about inclusivity, making sure that our materials are broadly available in a variety of forms, and also generally in quality, making sure we're going out at key points and getting the feedback that really does have an impact when informing this process. All right. So taking all those engagement goals into consideration, we can see that engagement often takes effort, as I'm sure you're all very aware of. But we're hoping to embed this effort into our public engagement plan to make sure that it really flows smoothly throughout the process and that we're very intentional and aware of what we're doing at each stage. So this is going to take the shape in many forms. We're going to be having meetings with the CTT and the SOT with our local jurisdictions and our stakeholders, workshops with the public in general. We're planning to have these workshops be both, or we're planning to have most of our participation be very flexible between virtual and in-person. As you all saw today, that's something that we had to make a decision on this week. And that's something we're going to be very aware of and cognizant of as we go throughout this process, understanding what virtual tools we have in our toolbox to really ensure a smooth engagement process. That'll also include a lot of online engagement with our online campaign. That'll be social media, it'll be surveys, online surveys that we release, and also an outreach toolkit, which I'm going to get into a little bit further in our presentation. One thing we did want to talk about and talk through with you all today is that, special effort is especially needed for our traditionally marginalized groups. And one of those, though not only, is our Spanish language, our Spanish speaking communities. And so we do have embedded in our public engagement plan potential touch points, with interpreters. We're going to be translating key public outreach materials into Spanish. We're also going to have Spanish speaking outreach specialists involved throughout that process to make sure that we're reaching those communities as effectively as we can. So speaking on that, we did want to ask our CTT and SOT members here today what some historically underrepresented neighborhoods or businesses or organizations are in your area. And the reason that we're asking this today is because, we on our end have the data and the census information that we'll be going through that we have to identify block groups or areas where we can point to low income households to low or no vehicle areas. But that data, to be effective, really does need to be layered with that local on the ground knowledge that you all have in your local jurisdictions and in your areas. So we did just want to take a minute to ask anyone just to write that in the Menti, or if we wanted to talk through or write it in the chat. These are things that we are going to be including in our public engagement plan, so we'll be documenting them throughout the process.
And again, as you're thinking through this, this can be, you know, very specific locations. You can call out, like Sam said, the specific neighborhoods or areas, or it can be a little bit more general if that kind of makes sense for whatever it is that you're describing. And again, if it's not something that you can think of right now, but that you want to provide to us after the fact, that's also great.
I see Kim Johnson added food banks into the chat. That's really great information, and definitely even a data point that we can get, which is really good.
And I think we're seeing other kind of descriptions of other data layers that may be available that we can use to augment some of what Sam was describing earlier as well, such as the tier 1 areas of the county. I want to recognize that one of the comments that someone offered, that this has been challenging in terms of engagement because of the large size of the area and lack of central gathering places. That's a great observation, and something that I think that will continue to be a challenge for us, frankly.
Yeah, that came from me. We ended up doing a lot of mailings out here, and I felt like our best events were kind of drop by events that lasted over a long period of time. It was hard to get people to come to a traditional big tent event. That was really not very effective out here. And so we did better setting up like at a gas station or a grocery store and handing out informational flyers with links to, or QR codes to surveys, that kind of thing. It just seemed like it worked better than trying to get people to gather. There's not like a large cohesive community out here. And then the other thing we had really good luck with, we did a targeted mailing to very large landowners and invited them specifically to a meeting and got very good response from that. That's something that Campo probably has more experience with this than Raleigh does, but because of their engagement in county areas. But you know, there's some pretty significant landowners out here, and their attitude is, we found their attitudes to be very different than individual homeowners. Their interests and their concerns were very different. They basically wanted to be annexed and have broadband, please. And the individual people were like, leave me alone. I moved out here to get away from it all. That's very broad generalization.
That's really helpful, Bynum. Thanks for chiming in on that. Any other thoughts that people wanted to share on this?
Hi, this is Frances Bisbee, and I feel like this is almost pre-recorded because I'm always representative of under-resourced communities, and I do a lot of community advocacy work through community anchors like faith-based or those human services and nonprofits that serve those frequent visitors or frequent or familiar faces, I think is what we call them a lot. But you need to go to places where they naturally convene and go through. And a lot of times I find that we give them 4 choices of things to say, and they've been talked to for so long about so much, and they don't really feel there's a lack of trust, that we need to have an open-ended way for them to tell you what they're experiencing and what's happening to them. And the way to do that is to really go through a trusted community anchor, a church, or like an organization like Partners for Environmental Justice that work out of Southeast Raleigh, or there's a wonderful church that's doing great big things in the southern part. But to use your regional centers like Daryl Blevins and Richie Hayner have, I mean, they see 3,000 to 5,000 people when it's not COVID going through those doors. And these are the people who are on public assistance and they need the help the most. But they using people that serve them, your nonprofits like Step Up Ministries and Interfaith Prison Ministries for Women and things like that. They have access to the people you want to talk to. You'll find that in our area, because you wander in and out of metropolitan and rural, and you have these pockets of neighborhoods that look like spaghetti, and you can't possibly walk from the back to the front, much less the fact that they're sort of isolated geographically, and to get to access to public transit, they don't have it. And so we've, the need for microtransit or a way for them to get from these little pockets of very dense populated communities to access all of these wonderful things that are coming, like bus rapid transit. Well, that's great, except for they can't get to the stations, that provide the service where to get on. So I just encourage you to include organizations that they're already in touch with these folks, and to make sure that you have a mechanism for them to really be able to tell you not A, B, C, or D, but what they're experiencing and the fact how transportation and the lack thereof is impacting their life. Because we've pushed them out into the perimeter of our county and pushed them outside of fixed route. So it is kind of on us to figure out how to help them get to work and food security and healthcare and all of these things that they don't have access to.
Yeah, Francis, that's a really helpful perspective, and I think you're absolutely right. They're thinking about affordability, thinking about accessibility to certain services often does put us in conflict with actually being able to get some of those multimodal accommodations that we, from a transportation perspective, are hoping to see. So I think that's something we need to be particularly attuned to as we're trying to identify some of these areas.
And I think to that, this is an input that you all are giving us, both on the Menti and in the chat, and Francis, as you spoke up just now, is one of the reasons why we're finishing up our PEP following meeting with you all, to be able to incorporate and fold this information into it at the start of this process. All right. We're going to go on to our next slide, which is another question. Shifting gears a little bit, but kind of along the same lines of outreach and addressing who we can bring into this process. We wanted to ask that question of you all because we've sent and communicated with our CTT and SOT members that we have reached out to that are with us here today. But we do want to make sure that we're not excluding anyone. And so we did want to ask of you all both what stakeholders or organizations that you all know of specifically that we need to be reaching out to and including. And then on top of that, are any of those groups ones that should be elevated to the SOT level that some of you are all involved with us today?
And I think I would just add, as you're brainstorming this, we are kind of thinking about this as Sam mentioned, in a few different ways. We would love to start to become aware of any of those groups that we think could be a conduit to reach out to the public for some of our outreach efforts. There may be some folks that they don't necessarily want to directly engage as a stakeholder, but that they want to be able to push out information. There may be others that we can engage with in more of a limited stakeholder engagement method to kind of sit down and get what their position is, a little bit more information about their particular interests or knowledge area. And then as Sam said, there may be a few others that do kind of rise to this level of being a part of the standing stakeholder oversight team. We can see we have a robust list of folks in our SOT already, and we'll toggle back and forth every now and again and let you guys continue to get a look at that if you need some reminders. But looks like we're already getting some great comments and thoughts. Yeah, this is great, and I think it's helpful to see again, we're running a pretty wide gamut between the types of groups that are being entered here. Some are more neighborhood associations. I see Johnson County Airport, construction, waste landfill, food banks, chambers of commerce. Yeah, so keep those ideas coming. That's incredibly helpful. All right.
Okay. I'm gonna go on to the next one, but please don't hesitate to continue writing any thoughts in the chat, or of course, always reaching out to us after this meeting is perfectly fine as well. Oh. So in our meeting today, we've talked through a lot of what the role of the CTT and the SOT is in the bigger picture of this process. And we want to make sure to be clear that we will be providing you all the resources to disseminate the information, to be able to go out to your communities and communicate what the C's is throughout this process to make sure that we're getting that feedback that we're really trying to get with the establishment of our public engagement plan. So I do want to say that coming soon is a project website. And on that project website, we're going to have a sub-page that's called SOT. And in that, we'll be including an outreach toolbox. And so this outreach toolbox is meant to set up educational materials, templates for social media posts, provide Spanish language materials, email templates that are resources for you all to be able to take with you to use as you're disseminating this information. We know we're asking a lot for the success of this engagement, and we really want to make sure that we're giving you all the tools that you do need. And so we're hoping that this outreach toolbox is really something that'll come, it will be beneficial for you all. Along similar lines, we did want to explain how we'll be communicating with everyone. I'm sure you've gotten a taste of it so far with all the email updates about this meeting that you've gotten in the past few weeks. But we did want to say to our CTT members, we have a shared SharePoint site that we're planning on inviting you all to, and that's where we'll house our materials for review that you all can access, that we'll share with you. And of course, we'll also be communicating via email to share whenever something has been posted. And for our SOT members, we wanted to emphasize that we'll be communicating with you all through email mostly, but did want to say that to everyone, this project website will really be a good resource because it's going to include that outreach toolkit specifically. But in general, our project website, you can see an example or the progress of it so far on screen here, is going to be our engagement hub throughout this process. It's going to give our project overview. It'll show people what our study area is right up front so that whenever someone visits it, they can see immediately if they're included in this study and should be involved. And we're also going to have front and center what our engagement and upcoming engagement activities are so that whenever people do visit the site, they know straightforward what's coming up so they don't miss a thing. Okay, I want to take a pause now again and see if anyone has any questions about the public engagement plan or anything that we've discussed so far. Can I assume? Oh, did you see your hand?
So I see some of those additional comments coming in about other places that we can connect with folks in our underrepresented community. That's very helpful as well. So thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, like Allison, I'll assume perfection on my end too. And we're going to get into the final portion of our presentation, which is really kicking off this engagement process with some of that visioning and opportunities and challenges analysis with you all here today that we're calling idea gathering. So we're going to start it off with some more Mentimeter questions, and this can definitely also be conversation. But we did want to get some ideas flowing about how people feel about things in the Southeast area today. And so we're starting on a positive note, and we wanted to ask, what do you love most about the Southeast area today? And this doesn't have to be about the whole area. You know, it can be very specific to the areas that you live in or work in, or where you visit on the weekend. The barbecue, that's a good one. Proximity to ocean. Yeah, I mean, you can hop on 70 and get down to the coast fairly quickly. I'll be doing that tomorrow. Actually, I'll be traveling to Morehead City. So
See the theme emerging of the close to city with a town feel, diversity place.
it's good to see that everyone likes the location, because that's one thing we can't change about the Southeast area. I guess we can. We could extend the boundaries again.
Lots of comments about the neighborly atmosphere and the friendliness of the people, proximity to agriculture, but also I've seen several notes about the opportunities for employment and education. Yeah, these are great.
All right. Looks like our numbers have slowed a little bit, so I'm going to take us to our next question, which is, what are the most important opportunities for this plan to address, or that this plan can address? Smart growth, yeah, we're definitely a growing area, and we're likely to continue to see that. So how can we do that in intentional ways, especially as we're thinking about our land use scenarios moving in the summer?
And these can be very specific opportunities if you want them to be as well, if there's something specific on your mind. Several comments about the land use and transportation connection in support of land use planning. Quite a few about multimodal accommodation as well. I'm glad somebody mentioned the tomato map. It wouldn't be a good area study meeting if we didn't talk about the tomato map at least one time.
And I think even going to what was mentioned earlier in our discussion, considering first mile, last mile connections, and you can see that kind of coming through in what we're saying about connectivity and being intentional and multimodal. All right. I think our numbers have teetered around the 40 mark throughout this. We're going to go to our third and final question in this form, which is about our obstacles. So we've talked a lot about our assets and also what we can improve but we'd like to hear now from you all what obstacles we might see as we get into this plan.
It seems like funding might be one of them. A lot of big themes coming out of this. You see implementability, making sure that there's support, coordination with agency partners. All of these things are kind of coming out in various different themes.
All right. Had we done this as a word cloud, I'm pretty sure we would have seen funding straight in the middle, biggest word, but. All right. Got a little bit of higher numbers here. People had more obstacles they wanted to throw out there. All right. Well, I'm going to move us along and take us to our next activity, which is a mapping activity. So we have a bit of a task for the people who are joined with us here today. If you all wouldn't mind on your phone or computer navigating to the URL that's on screen, I will also drop it in the chat for easy access to everyone. But what that is, and I'm going to pull it up in a second here, but first I'm going to talk through it, is an interactive online GIS map that we're going to use to collect feedback from you all on 3 big topics. On places, so thinking about land use, thinking about places that reflect well on the community, areas that may need to be improved. Is someone asking a question? Just want to make sure I wasn't cutting anyone off. And finally, places that may need to be protected or maintained. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Our second topic is about transportation, thinking about concerns or opportunities related to safety and congestion, or some of those opportunities related to transit and our multimodal connections. And finally, we wanted to have a catch-all category for other ideas. These can include schools, utilities, some of the things that you see on screen here, as well as any additional ideas. So I'm going to transition over to this map now so everyone can see it. Has anyone been able to successfully open it? Is anyone willing to admit that?
I got it to open. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's open.
It works.
Great.
Yes, open.
That's great to hear. Thanks, everyone. All right. So I'm going to give a bit of a tutorial on how to use it. Again, I think We've all had a lot more experience with these things in the past 2 years. So hopefully it becomes a little bit intuitive. But on this map, we have outlined in blue our Southeast area study. And we have a place on the right-hand side, a legend essentially, but also an area to click and drop anything. So all you have to do is click on any of these icons over here, each relating to those 3 topics that we have. So we have 3 of each of our topics. So 3 and 3, points, lines, and polygons for each of our places, transportation, and other ideas. So as an example, if I wanted to place a transportation line, I could do so by clicking on the transportation line icon on the screen, zooming into wherever I wanted to go, and then starting to draw my feature. And we're gonna double click to complete, and a little comment box is gonna come up. So here I'm gonna say future I-42. And once I've done that, you can save it, and then your comment will be up for us to take a look at later, and really have a geographic kind of spatial representation of some of these ideas. So we did want to go through these topics with you all here today to kind of minimize any homework on your end. Please feel free to do it on your end now. I see some things have started to pop up, which is great. It's updating live as we're doing it. But a great thing about this map is that we will also be sharing this map along with our recorded presentation to the entire SOT and CTT teams. So people are able to provide us this feedback following this meeting. We do understand that not everyone was able to make it here today, so we want to make sure that we're giving everyone the opportunity to give their feedback, and this will be a great way for people to kind of take the time, take the week to be able to do that. So for those of you who were able to make it, hopefully you don't have as much homework if we're able to, to do it here together. But I did want to open up the floor to some discussion, starting with our places category. Is anyone willing to share what they've put down on the map already, or anything that they'd like to say about places in the area?
And Sam, just to kind of help everybody get reoriented, can you just quickly review the different things we were hoping to get folks feedback on, starting in the places section?
Yeah. So we were hoping to talk through places, and I can read a little bit from our PowerPoint. Is as our area grows, what would make these places better as you're thinking through these things? So if we're thinking about areas that reflect well on our community, think back to the visioning question that we asked just a few slides ago. Are there any of those areas that you were thinking of as you were, thinking about a greenway that you really, well, that would go under transportation, but a neighborhood that you really enjoy, that you can now spatially put on the map? Things like that is what we'll be talking through with places. So maybe any areas that need to be improved in any way, or areas that we can see or should be considered for preservation or conservation as we're thinking about where and how we grow.
So just to kind of wrap all of that up, if there are any places that you want to, and this is a great example here, preserving and improving the Clayton downtown area. That's a nice example of an area that reflects well within the Southeast area, but that we'd like to continue to see preserved and enhanced going forward.
Look at that, it looks like the map just auto updated, so that's great. We are receiving feedback.
And if folks want to chime in, again, you're welcome to talk to us about some of the things that you've chosen to put on the map, or just thoughts that you have. We'd love to kind of talk about some of the things within these various different categories that are on folks' minds. Anybody want to chime in on the places category specifically? Any particular places that we should be paying attention to as great examples, or as places that perhaps need to be focused on for additional improvement?
Maybe if I zoom in, I can find some, Allison. We've got in Garner a historic downtown with redevelopment opportunities. And do feel free to zoom in and out and get as close as you need to be able to mark your comment. We've got a mixed use community center.
Yeah, this is just the type of feedback that we're looking for, so this is very helpful.
What about transportation? Is there anything specifically related to transportation improvements that we should be aware of as we're thinking about this? Any connectivity opportunities that you'd like to share with us? I see we do have, we had a micro transit zone added up here, which is great to know.
And I think from the transportation standpoint, we're also interested in hearing about any safety, congestion, or also opportunities for multimodal inclusion. So all of those are great for us. And it's good to see we have quite a few corridors, it looks like, that folks are pointing out. Yeah.
That's great to know. Great information to know about improvement.
I see a comment about considering neighborhood routes in Garner to reduce the dependence on park and ride. So I'll go ahead and also mention for folks that may be thinking about what goes in the other category, and I see we have a few of them up there already. There are things that we kind of consider to be that transportation, land use adjacent content, whether that be considerations about utilities, integration with our schools, economic development opportunities, or also just regional collaboration. Looks like we've already got some really good feedback from an economic development and also coordination between modes. And I see a couple of people that may need to hop off, and that's fine. We're going to send this information out to the entire group following the meeting. So as Sam said, there will be continued opportunity to add to this map even following today's meeting.
Some of these other ideas could also relate to health institutions or, considering public health. Do we have access to grocery stores with the growing population? Do we see any drain on the health system? Things like that as well.
And Francis, I see your comment as well about identifying the locations of folks that need access to public assistance and that interfacing with human services.
With the right people, in terms of finding the contact in those offices, they can tell you a lot about the communities that they serve, especially like food banks, ministries that provide food, Meals on Wheels, for your seniors and things like that. They can tell you a lot about where these sites are concentrated and, would be a good place for you to connect.
Absolutely. Oh, there are a few more that popped up. Yes, there are miserable traffic jams there daily.
No possible town center.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, I do appreciate everyone jumping on this map. And as I mentioned earlier, and as Allison mentioned, please do continue to input your thoughts and ideas onto this map. Like we mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out an email that includes the link to this and this presentation to the entire group, the entire committee. So by no means is this your last chance to provide this type of input, but we just wanted to make sure we talked through some of those things with you all here today. This type of kind of idea gathering activity is something you're going to see throughout in the next couple of months for our first phase of engagement, as we're really trying to understand those on the ground conditions from you all, from the public, and then also layered on with that data piece as we think about putting together our existing conditions state of the region report. But with that, I'm going to transition back to our presentation and kick it back to Allison for our wrap up and next steps.
All right, thanks, Sam. We do appreciate everybody sticking with us. This has been some great feedback, and it's nice to get this conversation started with everyone. So just looking forward into our next steps, I kind of talked about that at a high level as we went through our schedule. But as you've already heard, we are going to be moving forward with our project website in the month of May. And then we're also going to be working on our state of the region deliverable. So essentially what this is a look at our existing conditions and an opportunity to also better understand some of those plans that we talked about from our member jurisdictions or from the regional context that are going to be relevant to our planning process. So you can look for that as the summer gets underway. July is going to be an important month for us, and then the end of June as well, as we think about beginning our engagement process. We know that the summer is always challenging, so we're going to be sensitive to the wonderful July 4th timeframe and making sure we don't tread on that. But we're going to be thinking about our online survey as well as public meetings, jurisdictional briefings, and then for you all, an outreach toolbox that, as Sam mentioned, is going to give you that information at your fingertips to help us communicate what the public opportunities for feedback actually are and how to participate in all of those. And then thinking about the next meetings, we're looking right now at those being in August for the core technical team as well as for the stakeholder oversight team. We'll likely have separate meetings of the group at that time, but we'll continue to keep both groups updated as we go through this process.
I did want to throw in there our outreach rollout that's scheduled for late June 2022. It's going to be a touch point that we have again with you all to familiarize yourselves with the outreach steps and engagement that we're going to be doing in July, just so that everyone is aware of that first phase, and we can all move forward together as we go into our first phase of engagement.
All right, well, that gets us all the way through our presentation, and we really appreciate all the feedback and opportunities for dialogue that you all have given us. Again, thank you everyone for pivoting to this virtual format with us. Are there any final questions that folks have before we adjourn for the day?
Yeah, hi, I have just one quickly, Ken Marshman here. Since you mentioned virtual, do you anticipate that in the immediate future for next meetings that these will continue to be virtual, or do you anticipate any in-person meetings?
That's a great question. We would like to see some in-person meetings if that's feasible for us. Obviously, we'll continue to kind of pay attention to what the overall landscape is generally. But yes, we would anticipate that there's probably going to be a blend of some in-person and virtual as we continue to go forward into this. But this one was a little bit of a last minute shift. We don't like to do that, but just the rise in case levels kind of made us feel like we needed to pivot a little more quickly. We will be as proactive as we can in communicating exactly how those in-person or virtual formats are going to be conducted going forward.
And I'll also give a shout out to the calendar invite that came from me. In there is a Google form survey that you can take to indicate your preference, just so that we have a good idea of the group's overall preference as we're moving forward for in-person or virtual meetings. Is there anything, Brandon, that you'd like to add at the end here?
I don't think so. Thank you all for your time today. This was great. A lot of great feedback. We really appreciate it. And I put my contact information in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me anytime.
All right. Well, thank you all so much.